I've conducted Memorial Day services in a lot of different congregations over the years, and quite often people are surprised that we are taking note of Memorial Day. It is, after all, a national holiday, not a religious holiday. And there were many years when perhaps our congregations were full of people who found themselves really conflicted about Memorial Day. But given what Memorial Day has become, the holiday gateway to summer, a day for mattress sales and car sales, for picnics and cookouts and fun adventures, I think it's really important to remind ourselves of the true meaning of the holiday. And since we Unitarian Universalists are countercultural, if the culture says Memorial Day has no meaning other than to buy and spend, we should say differently. Now, there are a lot of conflicting claims about the origin of this holiday. Without a doubt, all of the supposed originators of the holiday had one purpose in mind, and that was to remember and honor those who have died in battle in service to our country. Originally, some of you may remember, it was called Decoration Day, a day to place flowers on the graves of military dead. It started after the Civil War. In the Civil War, 600,000 Americans died because, of course, they were Americans on both sides of that war. The sociologist Robert Bellah, who studies religion in America, has written a great deal about what he calls American secular religion, that is, religion not associated with any denomination or creed. He and others argue that the rituals associated with Memorial Day, the lowering of the flag, the decorating of graves with flowers and flags, the traditional patriotic music, are an important part of this secular American religious practice. It is a day that in religious terms honors sacrificial death. So why do I want us to celebrate Memorial Day? Because I think it's important to remember that in wars, young men and now young women die, and that they are our sons and daughters. They are most often not the sons and daughters of the wealthiest or most powerful people in our country or any other. You may remember that when Martin Luther King Jr. started speaking out about the war in Vietnam, he was roundly condemned, right? He was told, stick to your issue. Don't tell us what to do about foreign policy. But he understood that young African American men would die in that war way out of proportion to their numbers in the American population. And he was right. We Unitarian Universalists are called to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, as our children's story this morning reminds us, to seek a world of peace and justice. Therefore, we must remember that in wars, our wars, people die. And so on this Memorial Day, let us remember. So as I said, there are differing accounts of the first Memorial Day, and I guess the way to determine which is the definitive account is to go to Wikipedia, which says this. The first widely publicized observance of a Memorial Day type after the Civil War was in Charleston, South Carolina on May 1st, 1865. During the war, Union soldiers who were prisoners of war had been held at the Hampton Park Racecourse in Charleston. At least 257 Union prisoners died there and were hastily buried in unmarked graves. Together with teachers and missionaries, black residents of Charleston organized a May Day ceremony in 1865, which was covered by the New York Tribune and other national papers. The freedmen cleaned up and landscaped the burial ground, building an enclosure and an arch labeled Martyrs of the Race Course. Nearly 10,000 people, mostly freedmen, gathered on May 1st to commemorate the war dead. Involved were about 3,000 school children newly enrolled in freedmen schools, as well as mutual aid societies, Union troops, black ministers, and white northern missionaries. Most brought flowers to lay on the burial field. David W. Blight described the day. This was the first Memorial Day. African Americans invented Memorial Day in Charleston, South Carolina. What you have here is black Americans recently freed from slavery, announcing to the world with their flowers, their feet, and their songs what the war had been about. What they basically were creating was the Independence Day of the Second American Revolution. How ironic is it that what may have been the first Memorial Day was actually a group of newly freed black slaves asserting that white lives mattered. Of course, white lives matter. Of course, blue lives matter. Of course, all lives matter. But the reason we are being so careful to assert at this time that black lives matter is because in this society, they seem to matter less. They matter less due to the entrenched and previously unexamined racism inherent in our criminal justice system, in our public school system, in our ways of selling houses. Some of you maybe don't believe me. Maybe don't believe it's there. Just a year ago, just around Memorial Day, you may remember the incident in Waco, Texas, right? A big gunfight between a large armed motorcycle gang and the police. This large group of people who behaved with wanton disregard for the lives of both innocent people around them as well as the police officers trying to bring order and chaos, order out of the chaos, were not once referred to by the media as thugs, not once. Guess what ethnicity they all were. So often, large and well-armed police officers, in justifying the shooting of an unarmed black man, say, "I feared for my life," and I believe them. It is no doubt true because from the moment we are born, we are taught to fear black men more than even armed white men. This is what a racist system has taught in the years since those freedmen gloriously decorated the graves of Union soldiers, black and white, in gratitude for their sacrifice. And so, 150 or more years later, we have work to do. We have work to do. If Memorial Day could be considered a secular religious holiday based on honoring sacrificial death, then perhaps the work of anti-racism could be called the work of atoning for America's original sin, the sin of racial injustice. We have work to do. Some of you may have heard me quote this poem by Ross Gray that was written about Eric Garner. You remember Eric Garner, the Staten Island resident who died in a chokehold, police chokehold, while saying over and over again, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." A small, needful fact is that Eric Garner worked for some time for the Parks and Rec Horticultural Department, which means perhaps that with his very large hands, perhaps in all likelihood, he put gently into the earth some plants, which most likely, some of them in all likelihood, continue to grow. Continue to do what such plants do, like house and feed small and necessary creatures, like being pleasant to touch and smell, like converting sunlight into food, like making it easier for us to breathe. And so we have work to do, and today we continue the work that this congregation has been doing almost since its inception, and that I have been doing with you for the past year. We are soon going to sing our closing hymn, so if the ushers would let the children know, we will extinguish the chalice, and then we will process out to the corner of Route 202 in Halstead to take one step in that work. Our banner, the Black Lives Matter banner, the model of which you see here, will proclaim for all to see that we desperately want black lives to matter as much as white lives. Richard, are you leading the banner parade?
Jeff and I are.
I heard a rumor to that effect. So Richard will be heading back there in just a second. Richard, head back there now. I love it when people just do what I say. It makes things so much easier. Our children have been creating peace flags in the youth center, and they will be leading the parade, Richard. The children will be in front, and then will come the banner holders, and then the rest of us. We will have a very brief ceremony out there, which will be followed by another very brief ceremony that the Earth-Based Spirituality group is going to do. But first we are going to sing hymn number 131, Love Will Guide Us, while we get